Welcome to the Triple S podcast. Week 1 of college football starts this week. I'm very excited for it. We're going to be previewing some of the biggest games that happened this week, and I'm going to be picking my winners. We're also going to predict the conference champions for each conference at the end of the season, giving my analysis and predictions. But first, we'll start off with the game that happens Thursday night at 8 o'clock in Utah. It's Florida at Utah. They met last season. Florida won that in a thriller. Late second interception there in the end zone, 29-26. The biggest question for Utah is whether Cam Rising will even play in this game, their starting quarterback. He has an ACL tear that he suffered in the Rose Bowl in January, and so he says that he feels good, but we don't know if they're going to start him on Thursday. Oh, and whether he plays or not is really an important factor in picking this game. Utah's down their third-string quarterback, Bryson Barnes, who played sparingly last season, but when he did play, he played fine. However, if Rising start, that opens up much more to throw through the air and test the Florida DB unit that was downright awful at many points last season. However, if we go with what we think will happen, it'll be a more physical game because they won't be able to throw the ball as much around and won't have as much confidence in Barnes, and which could play to either team's advantage there to play more physical because they both have great recruiting classes, especially in the trenches. And so this is going to be a really physical game, I think, and it's going to be really fun to watch. Utah returned 3 starters on their offensive line, which was one of the top in the nation last year, and that's going to really pave the way whether they want to run it or throw it. It really helps them out a lot because Florida's defense, they got a new defensive coordinator in Austin Armstrong who's introducing new coverages and new stunts, but they're still very untested and unproven. Ventrell Miller, who was really the leader of that defense last year, is not there anymore. So if they can push that defense, that Florida defense, hard enough, Utah maybe could run away with this thing early. But the Florida defense has improved a lot from third worst in the SEC last year. And that is a lot because of what I mentioned before, their new defensive coordinator, Austin Armstrong. He has experience at Southern Mississippi, at Louisiana, and he was assistant at Alabama, so he has that experience. And he's really going to be revamping this defense from last season, because last season they weren't very good, and especially on third downs. On thirds down, they had the opposing teams had a 50% success rate against them. They were very not good last season. On Florida's side, on offense, they'll have to rely on their running game. They both have Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne. Trevor Etienne is my sleeper pick for a Doak Walker Award for best running back at the end of the year. He did great in his true freshman year. Graham Mertz, the starting quarterback, is a huge unknown. He showed flashes of potential at Wisconsin, but was ultimately really ineffective. However, a lot of this could be attributed to the coaching staff in Wisconsin. Paul Chryst is out there because he really didn't get a lot of talent from any of his quarterbacks there. Graham Mertz has that talent. He was the third best quarterback recruit in 2019, but he just really hasn't shown it yet. Billy Napier is really looking to get the best out of Graham Mertz, because he said that he's improved a lot over his summer. We'll just have to see that here. On the other side, Utah head coach Kyle Whittingham is already a known. He's great for his remarkable defenses, and it's no different this year, especially their linebackers. Utah was top 15 in sacks per game last year, with almost 3 sacks a game. However, Florida was 17th in sacks allowed per game, so this is really going to be an interesting contest in the trenches. Because simply put, who wins the game in the trenches wins the game. I think it'll be a very close game like last year with a relatively low score. I have Florida winning, though, by only a couple of points. One of the other biggest games this week is North Carolina versus South Carolina. The game will be Saturday night in Charlotte. Last time we saw South Carolina, they upset Tennessee and Clemson in back-to-back games under leadership of starting quarterback Spencer Rattler. Rattler's back, and he has the best team he's ever had around him, and I think that includes his time in Oklahoma and his other seasons in South Carolina. Running back Joyner will be a great explosive back for them, alongside the addition of 5-star Nicholas Harbor. It'll greatly help their offense. However, their defense is still a huge question mark. It was their biggest weakness last season, and it really hampered them in a lot of games where otherwise their offense would have won that game. And this defense faces a Heisman candidate in Drake May. He's only behind Caleb Williams in Heisman Trophy odds. And he had over 4,000 yards last season, 38 touchdowns, and he's only gotten better. He was also their leading rusher last season, which shows how little North Carolina has around him. That's why I think North Carolina will struggle once again this year, despite having somebody who will most likely be a Heisman finalist. And that starts this Saturday. If we can see and we can go out there and see a great game by Drake May, something that really cements him into that Heisman race. But North Carolina can really still lose this game. I think that they will. South Carolina just has a lot of overall talent, especially on the offensive side. And I think that they can just overpower North Carolina's defense. So I've had South Carolina winning in that one. The last game I'm going to preview today is LSU versus FSU. They play Sunday night, so we're seeing these games all over the weekend. Both teams are in the preseason top 10. LSU last season, under new head coach Brian Kelly, they surprised everybody and made it to the SEC championship game. Obviously, they lost to Georgia, so they still have room to improve. And FSU also had a great campaign last season under third-year head coach Mike Norvell. They won 10 games as well. And FSU is led by their quarterback Jordan Travis, who really broke out last season along with the rest of the team, both passing and rushing. They're a very well-rounded team, but one player that I want to specifically point out is Jaheim Bell, their main tight end. He's 6'3", 240 pounds, and he's somebody who can really be a great blocker in the run game, but also a leading receiver if you need him to. However, for this game, he's going to be lined up against Harold Perkins, the main, the outside linebacker for LSU, who may be the best in the nation. He went crazy last year as a true freshman and will wreak more havoc into the FSU backfield. And that's going to force Jordan Travis to run a lot more. Obviously he can do it very well, as he showed last season. So it'll be interesting to see how LSU defenders stop him. On the other side, Jaden Daniels, he's also a quarterback that can run very well. The QB for the Tigers. He may even be better than Travis, who both are in the Heisman race. I think he might be the best quarterback in the SEC. Well, I definitely think that he is. And he's without help on the offensive side of his game, though, as main running back John Emery is out for his game with injury. That means that we'll have to see a lot of what we saw last season, where Daniels was their leading rusher, and with both rushes and rush yards. So both defenses will have tough tasks ahead of them for this game in Travis and in Daniels. However, in the end, I simply trust Daniels more to get the job done. I think it'll be a really close game. I don't know if it's going to be very high scoring, though, because both of these defenses are really good. I mean, you just see these recruiting classes that they've been bringing in, top 10 and top 20, sometimes top 5 every year. So the talent is there on both sides of the ball. But in the end, as I said, LSU, I think, will win. And that could go a long way to the rest of their season, and it could affect the season for FSU as well, as they both are predicted to be contenders in that playoff race. And something else that will affect that playoff race is the conference champions, which I have some predictions for right here. Starting with the SEC, I don't think this is really big of a question. I think it's going to be Georgia. We could see LSU, who we just talked about, in that championship game, but Georgia simply has the easiest schedule, and they're back-to-back national champs. So I think that this one's really a no-brainer. Obviously, we'd hope for them to have more competitive games this year, but really some of the toughest teams that they face are Tennessee and then distant Florida, so it's really going to be sort of a cakewalk for them in conference play. We could see them with one loss. I would be surprised if they came out with 2. In the Big Ten, however, it'll be a lot more competitive. We have Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. I think that Michigan's going to win it here, but it ultimately depends on that final game of the season. Ohio State versus Michigan. Michigan has won the last 2 times in a row, and they've gone to win the conference championship. So I think that obviously this game is a game that is hyped up to all season, and it's hard to predict that game since we're so far away. But JJ McCarthy for the Michigan Wolverines has a lot more experience than Kyle McCord, who was just named the first-year starter for Ohio State. So if I had to say now, I would say that Michigan's going to win that conference. And those two are repeats from last year, but this one I have something new. In the Pac-12, I think that the Washington Huskies will win. They have a quarterback, seems like he's been in college for 7-8 years now, Michael Penix Jr. And I think that they'll just be really explosive offensively. There's obviously a lot of teams that can win this conference in USC, in UCLA, in Utah, who we talked about earlier. So it's really going to be a dogfight there. Sometimes, maybe even Oregon State, who was a big sleeper last year. Now they have DJ Uyangale. So it's going to be very interesting to watch. But I think that Michael Penix Jr. and that offense is really going to light it up out there on the West Coast. In the ACC, we just talked about them, Florida State, and we just talked about a lot of the reasons why I think they're going to win this. It's obviously going to be a competition between Florida State and Clemson, but, we just talked about how they're led by Jordan Travis, and, how they have Jaheim Bell, and their defense is so good, and I think that all of these reasons why I think that they're going to do all right in the LSU game is a lot of reasons why they'll win this conference. And I think that LSU is better than Clemson. And so I think that FSU can beat Clemson. I don't think they can beat LSU. So we'll have to see there. But I think that that's going to be really interesting down the stretch, FSU versus Clemson, to see who that makes it to that title game. And in the Big 12, I have the biggest sleeper because a lot of the biggest sleepers come from the Big 12. I think that Texas Tech will win this conference, which obviously if this happens, it's a major disappointment. Once again, to Texas, to Oklahoma, to Kansas State, but there always seems to be a new breakout in that conference. So, and I think that what we need to be watching out for is their quarterback and how they played last year. In Texas Tech, they have Tyler Shaw, who I think will be the next breakout star. We'll be hearing him a lot in December, maybe even January. And last season, they just lit it up. Ending that bowl game, they got 42 points against a really good team. So I think that that's just sign for what's to come. Obviously, it'll be difficult because, as I said, they have to play Texas and Oklahoma and teams like that. And so that's just going to be really interesting. And I'm excited for all of it. And obviously, we'll have more to recap in the preview next week. But right now, that's all.